Well, Tucker Carlson is out. A report in the LA Times suggests that Rupert Murdoch, the big boss himself, was the one who made the call. I don't doubt that for a second. You don't fire your most successful TV asset without the boss making the decision. People say it may have been related to his coverage of the deep state, including the role of Ray Epps, the accused FBI informant, in getting Republicans to storm the Capitol buildings in what my friend Gavin McInnes calls the Great Meandering. Others say it may have something to do with the settlement paid by Fox News to Dominion voting systems. I don't think Tucker Carlson was particularly deeply involved in that, but whatever it is a seismic event when the most compelling figure on the right of center in the highest profile TV show in America is suddenly defenestrated, thrown out the window. Joining us now via Skype to talk about it is one of our friends who is not quite the biggest, but one of the brightest voices in American broadcasting, our friend Ben Weingarten, who joins us now via Skype. He's a columnist with Newsweek and Epoch Times. And like me, I'm sure he was in awe of the power and the reach of Tucker Carlson. Ben, am I right? Was Tucker, perhaps other than Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, perhaps the most consequential figure in American conservative movement?
I think you're absolutely right. And as a testament to it, the long knives were out for Tucker for years on the left, with attempts to blacklist him, Chuck Schumer calling for him to be taken off of TV, a whole litany of people who wanted Tucker gone precisely because he actually put forth compelling counter narratives that resonated with millions and millions of Americans and gave voice to their hopes, fears, ambitions, and also covered the contrarian stories or saw the angles to stories that others would not, and interrogated them forthrightly and with passion and conviction. And I think that's why he garnered such a massive audience. And it's a huge loss, I think, for Fox. It's a huge loss for the country and arguably the world. Although by the same token, I expect that whatever Tucker does next will be exceptional and impactful. And I should add, on a personal note, you noted Tucker's how powerful he was when you would go on his show and expose to Americans what was going on in Canada and the increasingly draconian and illiberal policies being imposed there, which presaged a lot of what we've seen happen in America. But on a personal level, I've corresponded with Tucker numerous times, very humble, very down to earth, always willing to be supportive and helpful. And so on a personal level, I feel a loss for him and again for the country. And what you saw on television was who he was and is. And I only expect great things to come.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've never met him in person, but the Democracy Fund, which is the civil liberties charity in Canada founded to fight the lockdowns, he attended via Zoom on a giant screen a 1-hour civil liberties town hall in Toronto. It was broadcast around Canada, of course, for an hour to talk about civil liberties in Canada. And I think he truly cares. I mean, most Americans forget about Canada because it's that boring, cold place where nothing much ever happens. But Tucker keeps an eye on Canada. And he really, often he would cover stories that the Canadian regime media themselves wouldn't cover. And that's why I'm very sad that his Canada documentary may never air. I checked the stock market. And Fox News is a publicly traded company, and I'm not sure where it is right now, but at the exact moment I checked, the stock was down 4% in the 1 hour after that announcement, which is about $650 million US, or about $1 billion Canadian dollars. Imagine $1 billion value. That's an incredible amount. And as you say, whatever Tucker Carlson does next, I understand his executive producer was sacked at the same time. That duo, they could go anywhere. They could join an existing rival network, like Glenn Beck today said, please come join us. Daily Wire would do the same. He could start his own thing. He could go to Rumble. And wherever he goes, I think he'll it's sort of on a much larger scale when Project Veritas lost James O'Keefe. he was so integral to that brand that when he popped up with his O'Keefe Media Group, a lot of people just followed. They said, I'm here for James O'Keefe. And I think that Fox News has a lot of quality people in it besides Tucker. It wasn't just a one-man show. But where Tucker goes, millions will follow. And who knows? Maybe he'll start his own thing. I'm actually sort of excited to see where he goes next, even though I'm very sad he's left Fox.
Yeah, to some extent, stepping back and looking at the trajectory of media and a world where Substack has empowered so many truly, legitimately independent journalists, whereas you noted platforms like Rumble have sprouted up and the regime hasn't been able to crush them yet. Maybe the more intriguing question than why and how did this go down as it did is what happens next for Tucker? What's his next act? And what does that presage in terms of the state of non-legacy corporate progressive globalist media? So I think it's very intriguing, and I'm sure he'll view this as a huge opportunity and to some extent liberating as it is for anyone who leaves a major corporation to either strike out on their own or pursue other opportunities as well. So it'll be fascinating to see what this means for the marketplace of media itself, what it means for Tucker, and then what it means for the dissident voices in the West who he's helped elevate to such great heights.
I was just watching a clip of his yesterday on the Ukraine war. And that war is so establishment, both Republicans and Democrats. I mean, talk about your deep state. There's a lot of shenanigans there. And it is very difficult to question that war, let alone oppose it. And the things he would say and the bluntness with which he said it, I just yesterday was watching him talk about it, and I marveled at that. Wow, Fox lets him have his say. And, he has other contrarian dissident voices that you wouldn't even say are on the right, like Tulsi Gabbard or Glenn Greenwald. Or, there are some people he has on his show who I think you would even call leftists, but they're principled leftists. And they're often contrarian, they're non-compliant. And he spoke so bluntly. I just wonder what it was in the end that did him in. I don't believe it was the Dominion voting system thing. I think it was the fact that single thing he said was contrary to the dominant narrative. And I don't care how big you are at Fox, and I don't care how big Fox is in the world, the deep state is bigger. And I'm frankly, in retrospect, surprised he lasted so long.
Yeah, and I think there's an interview, or I think I saw some reporting talking about how one day, he will fall as well. He was talking to someone whose head had rolled over wrongthink, and he essentially said that it'll happen to me too. And as you note, there's so many different issues where he took a contrarian line, which just flew in the face of what elite kind of conformist conventional wisdom was. You ticked off some names. I'd add RFK Jr. to that list, who we had on recently after he announced his presidential run. These are people you're not allowed to have on in good company. And he was willing to slay sacred cows, whether it was the Russo-Ukrainian war, whether it was January 6th and the myriad narratives around January 6th, whether it was the Chinese coronavirus and the vaccines. We can go on and on. He talked about the things you're not allowed to or not supposed to talk about. And I think that's why he garnered such a massive audience. And it resonated with those who had no voice in so many other media. So that was why he was so successful, because he struck a chord, because he said things that people felt in their heart but couldn't articulate or didn't have voice for and to. And that was why he was such a powerful force, and I think will remain a powerful force. It's also worth noting, Dan Bongino recently also said that it was an amicable thing, couldn't agree to terms with Fox. But it's interesting to see what's shaking out in the marketplace. And the poetic aspect of this, if there is anything to laugh about, is that Don Lemon also fell today at CNN. Obviously, a favorite personality that Tucker focused on as well. It's sad today, but that is, I guess, kind of an interesting coda. It seems like there's a big shakeup that's going on across the corporate media world today.
That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.